a quick message before we get into this week's episode. For longtime listeners of the show, you know that Ethan and I have been very reluctant to add sponsors and to add recommendations to our podcast. Our priority is to you, to the writers, and to the creators. And so we've held off to make sure that we can find partnerships that we feel good about and products that I can honestly recommend. And that's why I'm so excited to recommend this week's sponsor to you, Quillbot.com, Quillbot.com. This is a tool that I am personally using to build a newsletter that I haven't announced yet, but it's been hugely beneficial for me. So Quillbot is a paraphrasing tool, and the way that I'm using it is I'm scrubbing long-form articles that are very, very in-depth with information that I know my audience will really value and appreciate. And I copy that content and I paste it into Quillbot. And Quillbot paraphrases all of the text into a couple sentences, sometimes a couple paragraphs, to really shorten and pack in the information, which allows me to better piece this information into a curated newsletter that I am sending out weekly. For people that listen, you know that Ethan and I really, really believe in the newsletter space. We believe that newsletters are great businesses to start, and you should start one. If you want to get involved in online media and start creating a business for yourself, a newsletter is a great place to start. And this tool, Quillbot, has been so beneficial for me in building this curated newsletter that I'm working on. It makes it so that I can jam-pack a lot of information into not a lot of space. And it really, really has helped me format my newsletter and provide the information to my readers in a way that I know they enjoy, in a way that I know they can quickly digest, in a way that I feel really proud about. So once again, check out this week's sponsor, Quillbot.com, Quillbot.com. It's easy to sign up, and tell them that Tim and Ethan sent you. All right, let's get on to the show. So, I was talking to my friend Matt Giovanisci, and he made an announcement on Twitter that he is shutting down one of his businesses. So for the record, I know Matt relatively well. We've never met in person, but he's like a pretty good Twitter friend. We've chatted for a couple of years. He knows that we're doing this episode about him, and he knows my opinion on all of this. So if anyone's listening, it's like, damn, that was pretty rude, Tim. It's not like that. And Matt actually was going to come on the podcast, but he was sick. So Matt made the announcement that he is shutting down his, let's call it his personal brand site. It's called moneylab.co. And Matt has two other businesses as well, brewcabin.com, I believe, where he makes articles about brewing his own beer. He basically created his own brewery in his garage. He's got an awesome 25-minute YouTube video where he documented the whole thing over the course of a couple of months. It's really brilliant. And he has his main business, which is called swimuniversity.com, where he writes content about pool and hot tub equipment and care and sells products there. Swim University is by far Matt's most valuable, profitable, and lucrative business. Brew Cabin just kind of seems like a hobby, but Money Lab is a perfectly good business. It does a bunch of money, maybe not as much as Swim University. Nonetheless, Matt shut it down, in my view, for no good reason at all. And he made a video announcement explaining what his thought process was. And I think it would be really cool if in this episode we go through a couple clips that I teed up in this video and then talk over the pros and cons of just the dichotomy that we've all struggled with a little bit. You have one thing that could be super, super profitable, or you have more than one thing with different streams of cash flow. So I'm excited to talk into this. What do you got when I bounce that off of you?
Well, I'm excited to talk about this too. We didn't plan this, but I think I fall on the exact other end of the spectrum from you. So I watched this video before the show, and I got to say, I like what he's doing. I have a bunch of notes here about why I think what he's doing is the right move. And so before we get into it, could you just lay out for listeners real quick the high level of what he says his reason is?
Of course. And I have one of those clips in the video teed up where he explains it, but it's a pretty long video. And obviously, we're not going to watch the whole thing together, but I will tee it up. Matt's reasoning is that Matt wrote a blog post once called The Lifestyle Business Manifesto. And he even talks about it in this video. I don't know if that part is teed up, but he even says in the video that it's the best thing he's ever written. And I totally, totally agree. Matt had an experience where he lost his brother. And it was just super powerful, where this lesson taught him so much about the fragility of life and about doing what you want and spending time in different areas of your life. And Matt is very passionate about this idea of lifestyle business and having your businesses work for you as opposed to you working for your business. And I totally agree with him. Like, he's an opinionated guy that's not afraid to speak his mind, and he's not full of shit. Like, he acts the way that he acts what he says. And his reasoning is that if Swim University makes $1 million a year pretty consistently, and it is the centerpiece for swim care and pool care. I don't know what you would call the industry, like, different chemicals to keep the water clean, and like even how you build them and all types of stuff. It's a brilliant website. So if he's making that much money, why is he spending time on this personal brand where he has to run a membership site, create new products, continue to make content over there, respond to customer service, and it's pulling his focus in more than one direction? And he made the decision that he's going to kill his personal brand business, moneylab.co. And it's interesting, man. It's an interesting thought experiment. And I told him, I was like, Matt, you're nuts. Like, this is totally the wrong move. And like I said, he's a person that really believes in how he lives. And he was like, no way. Like, I'm absolutely doing the right thing. And I don't care what you say. This is what I'm doing. And I respect it, but I still think he's wrong.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested to get into this and hear some of your reasons for it. But I'm glad you set that up, because I think one of the big themes that we're probably going to keep coming back to in this episode is this tension that a lot of entrepreneurially minded people have, whether you're a full-time entrepreneur or you're somebody who's working a job and has something on the side. There are realities to that life that I don't think get discussed very often, which is, how difficult it can be to feel like you always have to be doing something productive. And in a lot of ways, I think his reasoning for stepping back on some things is rooted in bucking that pressure. And I like it for that reason. But I think we're going to keep coming back to that. I know you have a lot of individual clips set up. I just wanted to lay out for people the mega thread here, which is like, this is a great example of a guy who's running multiple businesses. I'm sure a lot of you are in this same position. One of them is generating most of his income, but they're all doing pretty well. And there's not like a really great reason to step away. And so he was faced with this decision of what to do with them. It's a very hard decision to make. And I think he made the right one. So let's dig into it. What have you got? And I think this will help you if you're in a similar position. So Tim, what do you got?
I think so too. Well, or it might make it even more confusing. I'm not really sure. All right. So share sound. I think I did this right. Okay. I'm sharing my screen for the people that are just listening. I have Matt's announcement teed up, and I'm going to start with a quick clip about him basically just explaining it.
The other thing is like, I keep hearing this voice, right? And his voice is coming from the ether of internet marketing and online business, which is like, focus on one thing. That's what I keep hearing. And the way that I always interpreted, I always like interpreted that was, I have my thing. My thing is Ace Media, which is three things. It's Money Lab, it's Swim University, and it's Brew Cabin. I am focused on one thing. And the truth is like, no, I'm not. I'm focused on three things.
I felt like he was speaking to me, except exactly the opposite. There's a book called The One Thing by, I forget what the guy's name is, Keller Williams, I think, the guy that made Keller Williams, a real estate agency. And it is a great book. So I'm holding it up to the camera. Gary Keller. It's this book called The One Thing. And when I read this book, it totally changed what I was doing, because I realized that the one thing I need to do is create a content system. And I optimized my whole entire business, my whole company, everything, so that even though I'm doing a bunch of things, managing a bunch of different brands, I'm actually not. I'm only doing one thing, which is managing a content system. And then eventually I was even able to set that work to whereas now my personal one thing is making a sales system. And so I get what he's saying, where I have this one thing, I have a parent company that manages these other things. And you can kind of play tricks in your own mind, right? Where it's like a little bit semantics, where what are the actual definitions, and you can get ahead of yourself totally. But hey, that choice of me saying this is the one thing that I'm working on was the opposite effect for me. It allowed me to easily have these different sources of revenue and of income, as opposed to the way that Matt's talking about it, where it holds him down. And I don't know, I think he's really missing an opportunity to do that.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think I fall more on Matt's side of the table on this when I go back and forth on it in my head, although I'm guilty of not taking action that's like aligned with the way that I feel. So for me, I actually feel more like him. But I still carry a lot of projects anyways, right? Like I do my full-time work, podcast, personal blogging, and haven't really done a good job of like quite melding all three of those yet. So I get where he's coming from on this, but I will say, to your point, there's another person who I think falls more in your camp, and that's Sahil. So I was talking to him recently with the launch of, they launched Paperboy, which is, like, people who don't know, it's a newsletter growth platform. And then he's also involved basically building a holding company with a few other brands inside of it. And I just asked him briefly, I'm like, hey, how do you like the whole holdco thing? It seems really different from content creation. And he basically said, well, my involvement is content creation. So, he'll participate in the holdco. For people who don't know what that means, it's just a company that holds a series of companies beneath it. But one of his main contributions is this content system similar to what you're talking about. So I think there is a very smart play that's available there, but I see his side too. And let me tell you what I liked about what he said. This is why I think there's a difference. Your voice is telling you to build the content system in order to build as many income streams as possible. His is saying do the one thing. And I think the real difference in terms of success, like, there's no one way to skin this cat. The longer I'm in this game, the more I feel like the key to success is being able to understand what your personal instinct or what your inner voice is pushing you to do and follow it. And when I heard him say that, it reminded me of this book that I was listening to recently. It's called The Luck Factor. And it's really interesting. I've actually wanted to break it down on the show for a while, but it's this guy who basically did a scientific study of luck over many, many years and many different iterations. And what he's able to find is that there are certain personality traits that actually lend themselves to luck, and they're repeatable and developable. You can develop them. And one is that lucky people tend to have a much sort of higher, what he says is that they look for and capitalize on lucky opportunities. So they're out there paying attention to opportunities. And one of those things is being able to hear your own inner voice and move in the direction that your own inner voice is like prompting you to go. So to me, I'm still kind of just thinking through this out loud, but here's where I think I stand on this. I agree with you. What your path that you're outlining is possible for the people for whom that like matches their inner voice. what I admire about his move and why I think this is going to work out for him is that his inner voice is saying to do the opposite. It's saying, cut everything, double down on this one thing. And like all the numbers are telling him not to do that, but the voice is there. And if you listen to that voice, I think you have a much higher likelihood of having it work out.
Well, I respect your and Matt's opinion. I'm going to tee up another section because this is going to bounce off of that idea a little bit more. And I think this is like the longest section. This might be a minute and a half or so.
When this all came out, I had this thought. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Shit. Sorry, I muted it.
I'm choosing Money Lab as my focus, and I'm just putting, I'm saying, oh, some university, like, you other people, the team could just take care of that. But what if I went, well, what if I shut Money Lab down and I focused all of my attention back on some university and instead made this something that was truly a lifestyle business? And this goes back to my lifestyle business manifesto, which is the best thing I've ever written on Money Lab to date. But it reminded me of that.
There was one thing in here that I thought was really indicative. And it was where I'm putting all of my focus, because the way that Matt has his companies lined up is that he is solely in charge of managing everything. And if there's one thing that I think I have done well, through tons and tons of mistakes, by the way, I'm not like naturally good at this because I'm kind of an obsessive control freak. But if there's one thing that I've learned to do, it's get out of my own way and let other people be part of the team and do the work for you. And so when I was talking to Matt, so actually I have to back up a little bit. Matt's product for Money Lab is called Money Lab Pro, which is a membership site. And the membership site does require him to be available. But he's got like 10 courses that he's created over the course of the last 10 years or so. And Matt's a real meticulous editor. And so these courses are high level and these courses are a la carte. You don't need to constantly be there in a membership. So I was talking, I was like, Matt, what are you doing, man? Like, I'll buy this thing from you and then I'll just automate the whole entire thing. And then somebody can send me a report every month. I was like, I'll send you a damn report every month. And then I'll just send you a check every month. I was like, what are you doing? And then he says, yeah, but that check and that meeting every month still requires some of my focus. And so him, in his head, he feels, what's like the mental word for emotionally? He feels like he needs to be psychologically involved somehow. Like there's some mental bandwidth on him, no matter what. And I think that is a failure, or more a missed opportunity is the better word, is a missed opportunity for him to find scale. He doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That was a question that I had written as I watched this too. And by the way, we're going to link to the video in the show notes. I would encourage everybody to watch the full video. I was thinking as I watched it, I'm like, this is a masterclass in the real shit that entrepreneurs have to think through in their companies, because these communities, they're we've said this before on the show, they're not easy to shut down. You shouldn't just launch a community willy-nilly because, if you decide you do want to step back, it's a very complicated process. It's a really, really good, useful video for all that. One of the questions I had was, why didn't he sell it? And it's interesting to know that you offered to buy it, because I'm curious. I guess it sounds like he gave you the reason of the psychological weight. My guess was that his face was on it. And I was wondering, like, is it possible for it to run without him being there or no?
Totally is. 100% is. He can keep his face on it. There's still somebody on there. But, okay, so forgive me. You transitioned to this well. I don't mean to hog the mic too much, but he does have a personal reason for it, which is AI. And, I'm not even going to tee this part up. I want your feedback on it. He is irritated that there's this internet marketing culture, which has started with AI, which is fast. Like, just use AI, do it all fast, make money fast, forget about value and interpersonal connection and the emotional labor that goes into creating really great content. Just use AI to do everything and get rich as fast as you can. Again, I guess just put it out there. I think that's a misinterpretation, and I think it's not realistic to think that every time a new high-tech tool comes out, there's not going to be this bandwagon jumping on it. And then there's, of course, going to be like a recoil. The tide will go back out and people will find how to honestly use these tools in a way that maximally contributes to society in whatever form that may be. And I think he's jumping the gun too much, because there are a lot of, Twitter bros out there making courses about how to make $1 million with ChatGPT in a week and a half. And sure, that's annoying and corny, but again, I think it's a bad reason to make what I feel like is an emotional decision.
Well, it's interesting. I think, let me explore both sides for a second. The one thing I'll say for Matt is, it's tough if you have your face on a product that you no longer feel connected to. I could imagine what that would be like. And if that's the case, and maybe he doesn't like the culture of the space anymore, then I actually understand the impulse to just shut it down. Because it's like, look, it doesn't matter that that's not what I'm getting at. The nuance gets lost in the noise, and I don't want to deal with the noise because this is only 8% of my income anyways, So I get that. I will say, though, that as I watched this, I made a note here where I said, I think it's important to be careful when making decisions like this, not to get stuck in your own echo chamber, too. So inside the video, he's used a couple of phrases like everybody wants to make money, or like all I see anywhere. And a lot of people are guilty of this. In fact, you actually used similar phrases last week when we were debating Twitter, and you were saying like, oh, it's all MAGA bros now. And we had a conversation off mic afterwards where I'm like, you got to be careful what you're clicking on, man, because the algorithm is just going to start feeding you more and more and more. And it would be very easy to get stuck in a situation where all you're seeing is one thing. But that's, only a small fraction of what's out there. And so to your point, when making a decision like this, I do think it's important for founders to take a step back, maybe take some time away and get a sense for whether the entire industry has shifted or they're existing in an echo chamber. And I think that's tough, because that seems like a really new problem. Like, we are not used to living in a world where you can be artificially surrounded with one message and it can feel like it's everywhere, even though most of the people in your life have no idea it's going on. So yeah, I thought the AI thing was interesting, but to his bigger point, I actually think we're going to see a lot more of this too. Like, I won't say it's everybody. I don't think it's everybody. I think there's a lot of people out there who are still doing a really good job. And there's a lot of people who are using AI, but they're finding interesting and sustainable ways to use it. But I do think the culture around AI is going to spur this shift in ideology around scale, because for the first time ever, you can scale like beyond human work capacity. This sounds dumb because machines have been beyond human work capacity for a long time, but there's something going on there where I think it's the ability to scale is now so big that even people who were super driven in the first place are going to find that AI can outpace them. And so there's, I think, going to be like a revisiting of people's ideas around work. For a lot of people, not everybody. Some people will embrace it and they'll just run. But I've said this on the show before. I'm like, man, I hope that these tools don't just lead us to a place 5 years from now where everyone's still working 60 hours a week. You're just expected to get 2 times more done, which how likely that is. That's where a lot of this could go if you're not careful. So I get the impulse. And it's funny that you bring this up, because I'm actually profiling a company right now that's doing the exact opposite. It's called the Lost Art Press. And they're a woodworking media company, but they've really embraced this concept of like slow craftsmanship in the business. And I think in a lot of ways, they represent the antithesis of this AI media space. And we could talk more about them in a bit, but I'll just say I get where Matt's coming from. I don't think it's everybody, but I could definitely see where he's coming from.
I want to make it clear that I get where Matt's coming from, and I support Matt's decision to do what feels right for him. And maybe this is like an insecurity of mine, just because of how I grew up. And once I found this skill that I had, it could be fear driven for me, right? Like it has to feel very liberating for him to be like, you know what? I don't want to fucking do that anymore. And so I'm just not going to do it. And that's great. I totally support him. But in my practical head, I just cannot imagine why somebody would want to just give up free money like that. Like it's embarrassing to even say it out loud. But why on earth would you do that? Because yeah, there's the emotional standpoint. And if that's just the decision he wants to make, then what are you going to say? It's like, I don't want to do that in my life anymore, so I'm not going to do it. Okay, awesome. But you don't actually have to do it anymore. That's the part about it that I feel that it's a Warren Buffett type thing, right? Like if you don't have multiple streams of income, then you're never going to get there. And maybe Matt doesn't want to be super, super wealthy. Maybe he just wants to live on his own resources in whatever scale that looks like. And that's cool too. I support that. It might be fear driven in my mind. Nonetheless, it doesn't make any sense to me because it's not a whole lot of work to offset it to somebody else. And then if I were to walk down the street and go up to somebody to be like, hey, if you would spend 10 hours of your time and in exchange, I'll send you a report with the money that you make and I'll send you a check in the mail every month, probably for like 20 grand a month. Would you do that?
Maybe, but keep in mind that his other business is doing about $1 million a year right now. That's what he says in at least $1 million. It's at least $1 million. And this one is doing about 100K, he said, right? Like low six figures.
Yeah, it's about 100K a year. Okay, well, excuse me. Yes, I got that.
By dropping one, I think he'll double his business by just focusing, maybe even more. Like a really great media company can do millions of dollars in revenue, right? So if dropping one allows him to, let's just say, double the media company next year, then all of a sudden the trade-off is not 20 grand for 10 hours. It's taking 80 grand from him for 10 hours.
Now, okay. Perfect. Again, transition to the last clip that we're going to tee up. Okay. And this was actually the one that's a little longer. It's about 2 minutes, and I'm just going to let the whole thing play because I really think that this part captures the crux about what I'm saying and about what you're saying. So here we go.
When it comes to like growth, but I don't have to grow. The business is the business. I've been slowly growing Swim University for feels like over 20 years. I think it is over 20 years. And honestly, like even if I push it really hard, it doesn't want to budge. Like it just wants to grow at that pace. And the same for all the other businesses. And so here's what I'm learning, especially in this world of like technologically, advancements and all this stuff, is like, oh, here's the thing no one's willing to do. No one is willing to show up every single day or even like a couple days a week and publish content, like legitimately good content. This is what ChatGPT, or at least the rise of ChatGPT, has taught me about the industry that I've been operating in. I've watched a lot of people just go, just bend to its will and just say like, oh, I've especially me, I'm teaching people how to create great content consistently because that's the thing that I believe builds a business that no one's willing to build. It's the hardest thing to build because it takes 10, 20 years, right? And I'm watching all of my peers say the same thing. And I'm like, we're all on the same page until ChatGPT comes out. And then they all say, no, let's do that. Let's just do that. because that's easier. And it's like, oh, yeah, it's a tool. It's certainly helpful, but it doesn't stop you from, believing and doing what you say you're going to do. Anyway, that realization, I went, oh, that's what all my competitors are going to do at Swim University. They're all going to just use ChatGPT and make shit content. So guess what I'm going to do? The complete opposite.
Yes. Dude. When I watched this part of the video, I literally stopped it and wrote at the top of my notes, huge fan. Because I had like a whole page of notes kind of going back and forth. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is the right decision. Maybe it's not. And then as soon as I saw that part, I was like, I'm totally on his side. For the competitive reasons, well, for two reasons. Personality-wise, I think he and I are probably closer together than I am with other people. Like, I am interested in money to a point, but I've already been in a situation once where I was earning a lot of money and at the complete expense of quality of life. I never want to go back there again. There's no amount of money that's worth it to me. I will live in much lower circumstances before I accept that situation again. So there's a certain thing where you can like break this. You can break whatever that grip is that money has on you. And I don't know. I got there and I was like, I never want to be in this situation again. But more importantly, I think strategically he's actually right. I've been thinking this for a long time. I actually almost wrote something about this the other day. People are going to call me crazy, but I keep looking at the situation and thinking I don't see a point to SEO anymore. In fact, at Hampton, we don't even think about it. It's not part of our strategy. So that may change over time. But at this point, we've decided not to engage in SEO. And the reason for that is because with all these AI tools, everybody who's ahead of the curve is doing the exact same thing. And so when everybody does the exact same thing and there's no moat anymore in terms of like being able to produce that kind of content, I don't see why it's worth it for anybody to do it. And so what we're focusing on is trying to do stuff that ChatGPT can't do, like the super personal, nitty-gritty stuff like that. But more broadly speaking, I think what he's saying makes sense. Everyone is going to go do this. And if you want to stand out, it's the biggest opportunity you've ever had as a storyteller. You just got to put the work in.
Totally agree. I have many of the same thoughts with SEO. I think that it's actually going to make SEO more valuable instead of less valuable because the high level stuff will still rise to the top. We've talked about this before. If AI can make perfectly SEO content every time, then that means every single piece of content looks exactly the same. And if everything looks exactly the same, then what gets to the top, right? And so we'll see how that plays out. That's not the point that resonated with me here. What resonated with me is more tactical. He's saying it takes 10 to 20 years to get there. And in some cases, it definitely does. However, I think if your mission is to get wealthy, or maybe mission is the wrong word, if that's your end goal, if that's the reason why you're working, then you have to understand that hard work and wealth are only correlated to a point. And that point is actually pretty low. Like the wealthy people work hard to get past this escape velocity. But then once you get past that escape velocity, once your rocket can escape Earth's atmosphere, then there's no gravity anymore. And then you scale, I'm not gonna say infinitely, but the expression, like the first million is the hardest, And so if it's taking him that long to get there, then my argument would be that he's probably working on the wrong things. Now, that's a subjective thing for him. Maybe he just loves doing the writing. And again, that's a lifestyle choice. Matt, if you love doing the writing and that makes you super happy, then obviously that's what you should do with your time and fully support it. But if his objective is to grow his business, then he's probably spending his time on the wrong things. And if anybody listening to this is feeling like they're bogged down because they're working so hard and their work is taking away their quality of life, then you're also working on the wrong thing. Because wealthy people, it's not like that sounded super pretentious. It's not like wealthy people.
That's not riches.
Sorry, that was like a real, that was a real Freudian slip. It's not like wealthy people work harder. In fact, usually what happens is once they get to a certain point, they stop working so hard and then they get even more wealthy. It's that the steps that they take don't require more energy. It's that each step gets them further. Like each step is bigger. And so, again, this is really tough to say because I don't know exactly what Matt's goals in his life are. I know that this lifestyle business is really, really important to him and he wants to spend time brewing his beer and doing all that shit. And that sounds awesome. But if you're in this position where you're thinking, man, I've been working on this thing for 10 years and I'm at $1 million a year and that's really great and I'm proud of it. But I feel like 10 years in, I should be at like 5 million a year when you got guys like, I mean, look at what you're working on right now. You guys haven't even been open a year yet. And you're already, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but you're probably doing more than $1 million a year. There's a difference there. And I think that difference is really a missed opportunity for Matt and for other people that are in his situation.
There's a lot to unpack there. Let me think about this for a second. So there are certain aspects of what you said that I agree with. One of them being that you should focus on the work that you want to do. And I think, and that it's also important to understand whether or not your goal is to scale a business. The more time I spend in and around founders, the more I find that should not be a default goal. For some people, it is genuinely what they love and what they're passionate about. And those people tend to be very successful in business. Then there are people who I think spend time trying to do that, even though it's not their passion. And then you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because you don't have the default temperament to pull it off yourself. And you're not doing the work that you want to do. So you're not getting the outcome and you're not spending the time the way you want to. And it just sucks all around. And so for people like that, and I actually feel like I fall into that camp. I am, like I've already said this, I'm not hugely motivated by money past a certain point. I would much rather enjoy how I spend, every day of the week than build something enormous. And so the learning experience for me has been figuring out how to spend more time doing the things that I want to do while continuing to approach my financial goals in a way that's sustainable. And there's a clip in here. It sounds like we're probably not going to get into it, but he does say one thing, which is something to the effect of like, you can succeed if you are consistent without burning out. And I agree with that. I think that's a huge part of this game. So I think that a large part of what we've kind of come to in this conversation is you got to understand what your temperament is. If you don't want to scale a big business, but you do want to be very wealthy, then you probably have to get pretty good at hiring for that. Like this is something that I think Sam has done a good job of. Sam and Joe, the co-founders of Hampton, they both actually love the process of growing companies. But Sam in particular, he likes to be either very in the weeds or very high up. He doesn't like management. And so he's gotten good at hiring for that. And I think that's a lot of what's freed them to grow the company fast. So you got to understand what your temperament is and then either hire to fit the skills that you don't have or adjust your ambitions appropriately. And I'll tell you, you talked about this before we started recording, but this book I'm listening to right now has been huge for me for this. It's called Buy Back Your Time. And the fundamental idea behind the book is that if you're going to grow a business, rather than hiring to grow the business, you hire to buy back your time to focus on what only you can do and what you enjoy. And he kind of creates this framework where it's like it should be things that light you up, make you a ton of money, and that you're very good at. That's kind of your sweet spot that you should be working on, and then you should hire out everything else. And I found that to be new. I think a lot of times people hire to expand capacity, right? Or to try and bring in more money or something like that. But the concept of hiring to buy back your own time was new for me, and I've found that to be really helpful. So if people are listening to this and they're saying, yeah, I would love to be better at hiring, but that's not a skill that comes naturally to me, I'm in the same camp. This book is helping me a lot. Again, it's called Buy Back Your Time. But I think that's what it comes down to, man. You got to know your temperament. You got to know what your goals are. And then you got to take action that's in alignment with those, or you're going to be fucking miserable.
You don't want to be miserable. Let's put that right out there. I am not in the camp of it's worth it to be miserable, but I'm also not in the camp of you should do what you want to be doing. That's like a very, very new idea in society that only exists because of industrialism. Like for all of humanity, people did what they have to do. And I don't know what the word for that is with me. Like, am I like a purist in that way? I'm not really sure. But I like to think of it more of do what has to be done so that I can do what I want to do. And we keep going back to this, and I guess it's important to say over and over again because there's just no getting around this. It depends on what you want out of your life, right? And there's nothing I can say otherwise. I don't want anybody to be miserable in the pursuit of something that you don't actually want. Like, that's the dumbest thing that you possibly could do. But you really nailed it. For me, the highest priority in my life is what you said, is finding people. Because we talked about this before as well, when we talked about leverage and how everybody thinks leverage of technical stuff and media and code and, have a podcast that gets millions of downloads and stuff like that. But that actually only doesn't get you that far. And building a team, even though each person, if you think of it from a really ruthlessly business oriented, like each person only has a certain amount of productivity that they can have because labor is connected to time. That still doesn't actually matter because the leverage of your team isn't directly equal to what your team can produce. The leverage of your team is equal to what you can create by not having to do the stuff that your team does. And so if Matt would apply that thinking and think of all of the things that his focus is, that he is focused on, that he feels like is bogging him down by managing all these companies, find the right people to do that. And then Matt can really excel. I mean, he's talented, man. If you go to swimuniversity.com and if you go to Brew Cabin or even his personal brand, if you look at and we didn't even get to this, he deleted his whole YouTube channel, which just feels like that face slap emoji for me because he is so goddamn good at YouTube. I mean, his editing skills, he's made original songs just all about businesses that he started. Like, he is so talented. And yeah, I guess what it's coming down to is, to me, it feels like a bit of an emotional decision. For me, it's a huge missed opportunity to do just a little bit of work. He could spend just as much time as it took for him to shut down this whole thing and to refund the people and to figure out what to do with all of that stuff. The same amount of time it took him to pull this thing down, he could have just spent that time getting somebody else to manage it. And then he wins in every possible way. And then everybody wins in every possible way. But yeah, it's just, I feel like he's working on the wrong things. If this is where his head is stuck in, then it's just simply a matter of his strategy and his priorities aren't where I think, from my dream life, because obviously this is all about me, where I think he should be spending his time.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what people think of this one, because I think this is something so many people face. Like, it's, do I keep my job or do I go full time in the business? Do I keep both businesses that I'm running? Does my one business keep all three products up? Whatever it is, there's some version of this that everybody is facing. And I love this as an example of just like a very good inside look at how one person solved it. I'm curious to hear what people listening to this think, though. So is there anything else you wanted to shout out about this case study in particular, or like any other final takeaways for people?
Oh, I want to move quickly, give a quick congratulations. I actually don't know how to pronounce his last name. One second, let me pull it up. A friend of mine, Christian Collard. You can find him on Twitter at Christian Collard, Collard. He just sold his newsletter. It's called 8 a.m. I think it's get8am.com. I'm not totally positive. It's one email that comes out a day with one link to a cool article. He's been working on it for 3 months, and he just sold it. It's not even monetizing. Congrats to Christian. I watched him build the whole thing from scratch, and I also wanted to say that just because of how this game is really hot right now with newsletters, and it's going to be for at least the next 10 years. At least I think so. So, Christian is really proof positive that if you listen to this and you're thinking like, where do I start? Start a newsletter, man. Come up with a cool idea, get some email addresses, and you can really make something of it. So congrats, Christian.
Congrats. That's awesome. I got 2 quick shout outs as well. These are listener shout outs. So one is Jeff Hicks. Jeff, he's on Twitter at Jeff Hicks here. He liked Ethan's half-baked ideas. I think. He here's his comment. He said, I was catching up on the Copyblogger pod and was thinking about reaching out to say I enjoyed this episode, maybe because it was messy. I listened for how do these guys think as much as, or even more, for the data. Then heard the Father's Day pod, which is the one I did on Half-Baked Ideas, and he said, even messier. Perfect for me. So, Jeff, appreciate you. Thanks for reaching out. That was a total test. I had no idea if people liked it or not. It's glad to hear at least somebody did. And then I got one more, which is Brandon Zhang. Do you know Brandon? I feel like you two would have already been.
Of course.
Yeah,
of course.
So he reached out to say some nice stuff about the podcast, some of the other stuff that I've been publishing as well. So you can find him on Twitter. He's up to some really cool stuff. He's at Brandon the Zhang. That's Zhang. Right now he's over at Atomic VC, which is a super cool company. But he told me he's dabbling with some media ideas as well, which sounds really
he's
cool.
Special. You heard it here. He's so young. I mean, it makes me feel like the old guy. I'm 37, and I think he's like 22, 23 right now. And the amount of stuff that he's done, I was like, bro, when I was 23, like I was in a totally different place than you, man. So you just stay the course. You're good. He's really, really special. So yeah, check him out. Okay, I want to close out with 2 really hysterical tidbits. First off, I have to give you some props because you mentioned it in the show, and when we stopped recording our Twitter versus Threads debate last week, you told me to download Tweet Hunter, and I don't even know what Tweet Hunter is supposed to be for, to be honest. All I know is that now there's this random feed that covers up the trending topics on the Twitter sidebar, and my experience over the last week has been so much better, and it's only because there's something that blocks off these trending topics. So I appreciate you from that standpoint.
Welcome back to the neighborhood, man.
I mean, okay. And now to totally contradict what you just said, I started making YouTube shorts again, and proof positive that the echo chamber on Twitter and just the whole idea is so toxic right now. I made 2 shorts about it, clips from our podcast, and even on YouTube, this is what happened. I got 7 comments on YouTube, by the way. Mind you, none of the comments have anybody's face on it, because that's kind of the thing. Nobody actually shows their face. It's all ridiculous illustrations of who knows what. I got called spoken like a true liberal, which I don't even know what that means. I got, you must not believe in free speech. Obviously, the person didn't listen to the podcast. I got called stupid, and I got called, okay, this isn't going to age well. So, I don't know what else to say about that, man. Yeah, for sure.
Maybe you should check your privilege or whatever they say.
Exactly. That's weird.
Yeah, well, that's rough, man. For people out there who are listening, that's life in the public eye. It's and that's probably part of why Matt's shutting his shit down too, you know? It's like unless you're super sold on being the person who's out there, it's better just to be rich and anonymous. So yeah, man. Well, this was fun. I will keep an eye out for people's responses. I want to see what people thought of this. To Matt, thanks for recording this. I really like this. Dude, I wish people did more loons. I wish there was an easy way to find the loons that people just record, because screen sharing, like that, there's something about the format that's just so like real. And I love links like this because it's like, you can go find this. It's one of those links that's like every entrepreneur should see at some point. You know, it would just belong in a library somewhere of stuff you're never gonna see it on YouTube. You're never gonna see it pop up, you know, on like trending on Twitter or something like that. But it's a great video and people should watch it.
Yeah. Okay. The video will be in the show notes. The article, or excuse me, Matt's article, what those are called, the Lifestyle Business Manifesto. Monday Lab will be in there. Brew Capital will be in there. Swim University will be in there. Check out Matt's stuff. Check out his YouTube channel before he makes the terrible, terrible decision to delete all of his videos because they're so good. I mean, 10 out of 10 good. I'm telling you, he could be easily one of the most famous YouTubers that there are, but that's not what he wants. So appreciate you guys. Copybloggerpod.com. Sign up for the newsletter. You got anything else?
That is it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.